This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and various different guests, along with Arthur Parkinson, my great friend, gardening colleague, I don't know what else to call him, and co-host of the podcast when we started. So Arthur's back today. He's been off writing books, doing lots of illustrations, which I hope he'll talk to us about. But welcome, Arthur. It's lovely to have you here.
Morning, Sarah. You're very kind. I've not written any books since we've spoken, sadly. I wish I could say I have.
Well, you've got various books out, but anyway. But you are doing lots of illustrations, which I hope we'll come on to. But what Arthur and I thought we'd talk about this morning, early March, everyone's planning their gardens. The weather's cheering up a bit. The hours of daylight is certainly increasing. The clocks are going to change quite soon. Yay, hey! And so I thought I would just ask Arthur what he was up to in his beautiful, admittedly tiny but absolutely lovely little flower yard that he has in Gloucestershire. And he's still very much involved with his mum's flower yard in Nottinghamshire, so in Hucknall. So Arthur, first of all, tell us what you're up to.
Well, garden-wise, it's really interesting. Before we started this podcast recording this morning, I was just looking out the garden, and already we've got a little pair of robins that have paired up, and I can tell they've paired up because they're very happy with each other, just skipping about the pots.
Yeah.
And really, the more I see that happening in the garden, the more I want there to be a constant presence of plants. So that really has altered the way I want the garden to be, particularly in the winter time. So a lot of the dolly tubs that originally, when I first started gardening, would at this time of year be bare, full of bulbs.
Yeah.
I've actually got the lovely Bowls Mauve perennial wallflower in. And honestly, that was flowering till, I think, almost the end of November last year. And what was really lovely was last year in the spring, the pair of robins, probably the pair of robins I saw today, hopefully, they had a nest right in the base of one of these wallflowers. It was the perfect little sanctuary for them to make this nest, because the rim of the dolly tub obviously gave the nest protection. So that's one of my number one favourite plants. But the problem is with moving the garden towards a perennial scheme, I think, is to try and keep it exciting and not just be fearful of upsetting something that traditionally in a garden's border would just be left there. So I'm quite rough with things like the perennial wallflowers. So in the same dolly tub, I've got lovely big gladiator allium bulbs that I've planted right at the base of those plants that are going to come through the foliage. So there's always interest, trying to just make interest, but at the same time trying to make it more of a constant presence of plants rather than just a desert during the winter time.
Yeah. For habitat reasons primarily.
Yeah, and also just to look out and think, there's, to see the frost on leaves and just feel that it's more of a constant place for plants to be. So, I love the two apple trees that we've got that I think are just, I don't know the variety because they were given to us, but they must be on a dwarf rootstock because they're happy in these quite big Cretan pots. But at the base of the apple trees, I've got Alchemilla mollis, which is the perfect foil for a lot of spring bulbs as they go over. So I've got muscari in these same pots and lots of crocuses. And as their foliage goes over, the Alchemilla mollis really gets into its own with a leaf. So it's about having that effect, just as you'd have in an herbaceous border of foliage taking over from flower as the seasons progress. Yeah.
And I know you're a massive fan of roses. Are there any new discoveries there that you're adding in?
Yeah, more Mutabilis, but as usual, I didn't order it early enough, and you're always sold out of it.
Oh no!
But I've got my one Mutabilis, and honestly, I've seen a lot of roses in pots over the years, and they don't always look that happy. You often end up with just a stump over the winter, and if you prune it, it does then produce more as the spring takes hold. But honestly, Mutabilis, I've got it on the table in the middle of the garden in a coal bucket, so the size of, a waste paper basket,
Yep.
not a big pot. And it's just grown the most beautiful peacock fan of foliage. And I think the thing with a rose like Mutabilis is you don't prune them hard like you do the roses in a cutting garden. You just prune them lightly to keep that lovely triggy structure. So in terms of structure and flower is my number one rose, because I bet that will flower by the end of May, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Whereas all the other roses won't be.
I'd love to just come in there on Rosa Mutabilis, which I'm sure lots of you know. It means changeable or changing, I think, in Latin, Mutabilis. And it's so lovely because it opens a sort of pink and then morphs to a very soft apricot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's got this wonderful, slightly sort of bronzy, corally tinge to its leaves over the green. And I was actually had a writing month in Italy in November. And in the garden there, they had Mutabilis and the other China rose cousin, which is Bengal crimson. And I picked a vase of it, just to sort of a few last flowers. And it was still flowering in November, seared the stem ends in boiling water for 2 or 3 seconds and then into a vase. And it just gave me so much pleasure. I actually put it on my Instagram, in fact, because I just loved it so much. So I think those China roses, they never get black spot, they never get mildew. They're just such good, healthy value. And as you say, they hardly need pruning. You just need to take out the dead or diseased wood and thin them a bit, but you don't cut them right back as you would a shrub rose. No, I agree. It's wonderful.
Why do you think they're not breeding more of them? Because it always surprises me that it's still quite a small rose family, isn't it?
Do you know why? I think it's because they're really difficult to propagate.
Right.
I think they're really, and that's why we always sell out, because we buy as much as we can. But I think it's because they take ages to root as a cutting, and that's how they're done. I'm almost certain. And so it's just a long process. I think I'm slightly talking off the top of my head, but I think it may be 3 years before you get a decent sized, sort of 2 or 3 litre pot.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
So that makes them a little bit more expensive, but also hard to come by because they're not just churning them out. They're not vigorous hybrids, I guess. So that's my supposition, but I'm pretty sure that that's right. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful roses. If you don't know them, really those old-fashioned single China roses, brilliant for pollinators, flowers from March until November. Yeah, they're crackers. Couldn't agree more. They would be on my desert island plants, I think. And you've got rather obsessed with Geums, haven't you, Arthur?
Yeah, because honestly, Totally Tangerine, a bit like Rose Mutabilis, just literally gives me flower from May until October if I deadhead it. And they seem to really like being in pots. I was talking to a friend and she'd got Geums in the ground. And she said, they don't seem to be as flower rich in the ground. Whereas in pots, whether it stresses them out a bit more and gives them more flower. But in my grandma Sheila's garden, she's got a very narrow stretch of border. So I planted her Geums right up against the path, a bit like you've got them at Perch Hill. Because I just want to see if maybe the stress of the roots feeling themselves on a bit of hardcore, if that encourages the flowering. But yeah, I mean, I know there's lots and lots of different ones, but Totally Tangerine for me is just the best one. It's wonderful as a cut flower, and I love how all the little wild bumblebees really seem to home in on it. Particularly the little buff-tail bumblebees, not the big cuckoo bumblebees, but yeah, on a warm early summer day, it always seems to be alive with pollinators.
Good. And so what are your other plans for the flower yard, for the garden there?
So I've got a big Narcissi trial. Mainly just to see if I can like Narcissi more than tulips, because a lot of my pots, particularly the big ones, they have got tulip fire now, and I can't really be bothered to clean them out and disinfect them. I know I should, but it just would mean chucking so much soil away for the sake of one bulb that I am trying to move into. As you and Josie keep mentioning, there's lots of different varieties now in Narcissi. There's kind of a Narcissi for everybody.
Yeah, it really is.
So, I've got lots of orangery that I'm looking forward to, and one called Mondragon, I think. So all they rich, orange, punchy shades. And what I like about Narcissi is as soon as they're done in the pots, they don't seem to mind me lifting them. As long as I leave the foliage on and I deadhead them, I can chuck them in a hessian bag, hang them up in the shed or the boiler room, and then I can replant them in the autumn.
Oh, brilliant. So you do it straight away?
Yeah. I like all the hyacinths for the same reason. I can chuck them all in a big bag as long as it's breathable with the foliage on. And they don't seem to, I can see them in the garden, the ones from last year, they're coming up still with the buds. So whereas tulips, I haven't got the space really to be messing about with them and waiting for them to bulk up again.
No.
And my poor mum in Hucknall, her garden is completely plagued with grey squirrels. So we can't have tulips there anymore. No. It's just not worth I know we can do rose clippings and try and protect them nicely. But when you've not got much time and, I'm not there much, it's just better to have bitter tasting bulbs than lovely tasty Ferrero Rochers for them.
Well, it was you who taught me that hens don't eat narcissus. And we've got the variety Cragford in the hen run, which you yourself planted the bulbs, I think, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years ago. And when I got back from London, back to Perch Hill after we had Christmas in London, very early in the new year, I was sort of feeling like, oh, it's all quite muddy and it's all quite grey and it's all quite boring. And I was sort of really looking for a few things to pick to bring inside just to cheer the house up a bit. And of course, I found Sarcococker and the winter flowering honeysuckle, and a Daphne was just beginning in a sunny spot. But then I went to check the hens out, and there was Cragford, some buds coming, and I picked them thinking, oh, God, they're so early. I can't believe they're going to develop. But they did. They opened.
Did they?
And I got, good vase life. So they are poison. The animals just don't like eating them, do they?
No. The issue with the amount of hens I've got, I'm trying to do it in the dahlia bed that I've got on this land I rent.
Yeah.
But the problem is the dahlia bed currently is also a cockerel pen. So the narcissi, as they're coming up, I'm finding it in trouble. So I've had to cover the rows over with loads of hazel that I've coppiced to keep the birds from trampling them.
Okay.
So, but I'm hoping I'll still get a crop from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And then have you got plans for your summer pots? Have you been thinking about designing your summer pots?
Yeah. Again, it's about having more that's constantly there, I think. But, jolly the longbow, the things. So last year I did various dahlias in pots to see the difference in flower production, to be honest. So Tartan was one of my favourite dahlias last year. And I have to say, they were in, I think, just bog standard 5-litre terracotta plant pots that you'd buy from any decent garden centre. And provided I fed and watered them well, I think the flower harvest was quite similar from the dahlia tartan I had in the ground, actually.
Gosh.
I was really
so
impressed.
Good. Yeah.
Wasn't the same with all of them across the board.
Okay.
It was interesting. I had a Waltzing Matilda in the ground and Waltzing Matilda in a pot. I have to say Waltzing Matilda in the ground did better.
Okay.
So even though some varieties we know are really good for containers, I do think, by and large, if you're not there to water and feed religiously, most dahlias will give you more flower in the ground, and that's what I've learned.
Yeah, but Tartan was good.
Yeah, and Blue Bayou did really well in a pot too,
yes,
which was
I've
really
had that
lovely
in a pot,
for the butterflies. And obviously they've all now been lifted and they're actually all in a box in the boiler room. So they're going to be replanted. I've mulched all the dahlias I've got on this land but I really don't know if it's going to be worth doing that. It's very, very wet here, heavy clay like you are in Sussex, but we'll see.
Yeah. And what's your watering and feeding regime of the dahlias in the pots? How often are you watering?
I try and do it once a week. But I am religiously now lining every pot with wool, or old socks at least. Okay. And I'm finding that really helps a lot of things. So like if I've got a little viola in a terracotta pot, and even if I put just a bit of sponge at the bottom, when I come to empty that old plant out once it's died for summer, I'll find all the roots have congested on that bit of sponge. So I can see the roots are homing in on where the water is just being stored.
Yeah.
And I think it does help. It allows you to go away and you come back and you go, oh, everything does need watering, but nothing's at death's door just yet.
Do you use that hortiwool stuff, that new stuff?
Yeah, I bought some when we last did a pop-up, but whenever anybody I know has a freezer delivery, all the good places are using wool now.
Yes.
So you can just save it up, because otherwise you just compost it anyway.
Yeah.
So I think Riverford use the wool now.
Yeah, my
Piper's
Abel and Cole comes with that. Yeah.
All the nice places they're using it, so it's good.
Yeah. Great. And then feeding, what do you tend to use for your feed?
I do use the seaweed feed because in a small garden the comfrey just stinks too much.
Yeah. So you use a bottle of seaweed feed?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I love how Josie is very religious, and I'm afraid I'm quite slapdash. So I'm sure my pots would look better if I was more, calculating the amounts out, but I don't. So
I know, but that's all right. You've got your Josie will admit that she's lucky she has a team.
But it's true, isn't it? The feeder roots go down more, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think
if you
that's
measure
right.
it out. So it's worth doing it if you can.
Yeah. That's exciting. And then in terms of your illustrations and stuff, what are you up to now?
Trying to do more birds, to be honest, more just exotic birds, and trying to draw them. I used to get all those lovely Japanese freezers.
Yes.
Like ornate wardrobes and things, and the birds were on bamboo stems. I'm trying to do a crossover of that with British birds at the moment, but I'm finding it difficult because I draw chickens small. I'm finding I have to draw songbirds even smaller to get that same sense of character. I can't do a goldfinch the size of a computer screen. No. They look like I've drawn something out of Teletubbies or something out of Pokemon. Yeah. I have to go back to doing those small.
No, it's interesting, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then can you scan them and upscale them? They probably don't quite, work a bit.
I suppose, I suppose if they ever get a hand into somebody, they could do that. But I've not got the amazing scanner things here.
No, you're not known for your tech skills.
No, still got the iPad you bought me 10 years ago nearly that is very loved and well used.
And Arthur, what's the destination of your illustrations?
Well, I hope if I can do a collection, like I've done a big collection with the hens, if I could do a book that celebrates particularly songbirds throughout the world, because the songbirds in Indonesia are just becoming so endangered now. I was at Chester Zoo a few weeks ago, and they've got birds there that they've had to import into the UK because they've got them in like sanctuaries in Indonesia, but they're so highly valued as caged birds. They've had to bring them here in case the sanctuaries get broken into by poachers. So,
right.
So yeah, they need a lot of attention.
So it'd be cool songbirds throughout the world or whatever. That's such a lovely idea.
Songs of the world as we're losing them in all this AI technology.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I'll tell you, everyone, I sent Arthur the most amazing picture. He's always loved very flamboyant birds as well as flowers. And I sent him this amazing picture of a parrot sort of cradling its two young in its nest under its wings.
Oh, with its wings, yeah. It was AI. It was awful.
And Arthur texted me back saying, Sarah, that's AI. It's not real. It's completely
never
fake
do that
bird.
in the real world. No, so it's really scary, particularly on Facebook.
Shock, yeah.
The amount of AI wildlife stuff going on at the moment. I mean, there's like photographs of 15 robins on a holly bush. It's like it's never going to happen.
Gosh.
They kill each other.
Yeah, exactly. And then sort of finally tell us about your hens and what you're doing there and the dahlia patch and all that stuff.
The hens are good, but it's hard with the bird flu because we're not in avian flu lockdown at the moment, but we're in avian flu prevention mode, which is quite scary because you've got to be biosecure and disinfect your feet and it is worrying because there are people that are being affected by it, but hopefully it will pass. And it's kind of becoming a battle really against chickens and the amount of flowers I can grow on the land, because ideally I would have a bigger dahlia bed with more roses and things, but I have to let the hens have the grass. So just, and try not to hatch too many, to be honest, because I find if you haven't got space, it's better to not hatch too many birds because you just get so many cockerels.
I remember talking to you about why you were doing it, and it wasn't really for an income from the eggs. It was much more to protect the gene pool and the rare breeds. So, I mean, will you just talk a little bit about that? That there's just it's so difficult to preserve these amazing rare breeds.
Yeah, so a lot of the eggs that my rare breeds lay, they go to Chatsworth Farmyard in Derbyshire. I take the eggs up once a month because Samantha and the team there, they have a big incubator and they've just got more space to rear the chicks up, and then they sell them to people. So if anyone wants rare breeds, farmyards like the one at Chatsworth, they're where you'll be able to find them. But there's just, I think it's the expense. So my spare eggs I take to the local butcher. I sell them to the butcher for £1.50. They sell them for £3 a box. And at the same time as I'm leaving the butcher's, I'll see a mandarin orange from Peru or somewhere this time of year that's nearly £1.50. We don't value eggs or animal. We just, and I thought I'd be able to have an honesty box outside the house and I'd be able to sell the eggs for £3. And I just got comments saying they're too expensive. So there we are.
And that's even where you are in Gloucestershire, which is a wealthy part of the country.
Yeah, it's a shame. So no, you have to sell a lot of eggs, I think, to cover the costs. Particularly if you want to feed them organic feed, it's almost 20 quid a bag. But it's a pursuit of love, isn't it? And I think it's very rewarding, and they're lovely animals to see each day. And the eggs are so beautiful. Yeah.
Well, you were one of the first people who did those incredibly beautiful mixed colour boxes of eggs. Lots of people have jumped on that bandwagon now, but that came from Arthur Parkinson, everyone, just so you're aware.
Yeah. So the chicken drawings are out in a book in October called The Hen Party. So hopefully that will be another celebration of all the rare breeds. And not just the rare breeds, actually, all the commercial breeds as well that are treated so badly.
Oh, good. We'll definitely have you back before that. Yeah. Fantastic, Arthur. Well, it's lovely to catch up. And
lovely.
I'm going to talk to you in the summer more because you're growing lots of stuff for pressing, aren't you?
Yes.
So we're going to chat in early June, I think, when you're starting to do all your flower pressing. So see you then.
See you then.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and this week, Arthur Parkinson. Lovely to have him back. Next week, I'm with Joe Clark from Joe's Garden. Some of you may already follow him. He's a great Instagram phenomenon, an amazing young guy growing fantastic, interesting vegetables, and a great, great educator. I first met him last year, actually, but I now follow him very, very enthusiastically because I always learn something new. So Joe's here to talk about interesting veg. See you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.